This second saying of Christ from the cross, verily I say unto thee, today shalt thou be with me in paradise, is from Luke 23:43. I just want to point out sort of two things about the context of what's happening. So if you read this particular moment is really detailed in several of the Gospels, in Mark and Matthew and here in Luke. And the idea that's clearly coming across is that everyone was mocking Jesus. The rulers were mocking Jesus. The people were mocking Jesus. And it even says in the other Gospels, not this one, but in Mark 15:32 and Matthew 27, that those who were being crucified with him were also mocking Jesus. It used the plural. It says that they that were crucified with him reviled him. It says that the thieves which were crucified with him cast those things into his teeth. And so what I'm trying to get you to see is that the entire sentiment of everyone who was around was loud, and it was against Christ and mocking of Christ. And it's easy in life for us to come into situations where there's a big push and a big swing and maybe very popular, et cetera, to do things that are not godly, that God does not approve of. And sometimes we can even get caught up in those things and find ourselves going with the crowd and saying things that are really not true to who we are or who we want to be. But in this loud environment, in this time when everyone was saying the same thing, they were telling them, come down from the cross, save yourself. And even the thief who was on one side got to a point, he said, yeah, come down from the cross, save yourself and save us too. But for some reason, the other thief had a moment of clarity. And after having been swayed and going with the crowd and realizing what situation he was really in, he paused. And it says that he basically rebuked the other thief and said, wait a minute, you and I, we deserve to be here. We did things that got us onto this cross, but this man is innocent and he doesn't deserve it. And I want you to see that no matter what situation we're in, and we can't find ourselves sometimes swept up in the popular activities, and those things may be against who we are in Christ, Jesus is still listening. And among all of those different voices of dissent, all those different voices of criticism and mocking, he can still hear you when you have your moment of clarity. And so you are able to call out like this man did and said, hey, when you get into your kingdom, remember me. And that remember me is interesting because apparently a lot of his life led him to where he was on this cross. And so if Jesus got into his kingdom and he remembered him, he said, yeah, I remember you stole stuff, you were violent, you did all these different things. But what he was really appealing to was remember who I am now. It's never too late for us to turn to the Lord. And he remembers us at that moment forward, doesn't remember those things that we were. All those old things are passed away and we become new. And when we become new, he says, you can be today with me in paradise. You don't have to go work it out in purgatory somewhere. You don't have to go and do all these other things. Right at this moment, today, immediately, you can be with me. And so I just want to encourage you that Jesus is always listening. Sometimes we get caught up in things that we don't expect to get caught up in, but you can come to that moment of clarity, just like the prodigal son who came to himself when he was down in that pigsty. You can come to that moment, and then when you call on him, he's listening. He hears you, and you can be with him yet again. John 19:30, when Jesus therefore had received the vinegar, what we were just hearing about, he said, it is finished, and he bowed his head and gave up the ghost. This passage reminds us that when Jesus came and did the very deliberate thing, it wasn't some random walk and whatever happens, and I just get onto the cross at the end, and that's going to just do it. If you notice the ministry and life of Jesus, even when he was a boy, he told his mother, I have to be about my father's business. He told people, hey, I do what I see my father doing. He consistently got away and communed with God, prayed and sought his vision. Even the things that he got into when he first started his public ministry, he was ushered into the wilderness where he was tempted. He fasted and he was tempted. Everything that was done was intentional and deliberate. Not only those kinds of seeking and being very prescribed about what I'm doing, but there are over, depending on how you count, 300 prophecies that foretold what was going to happen in the life of Jesus. And so when I thought about how deliberate this was, it reminded me of something that happened in my life. So we used to have a beach condo and we had a pretty big veranda. So we had our furniture and all that kind of stuff out there, but it was very hot out there. And because it was right on the ocean, it could get really windy and breezy. So it was hard to cover yourself with umbrellas and still have them stay put, and et cetera. We decided, after having not success with the umbrellas that we were trying to put up, to get this sort of industrial, spend the money and get this industrial, cover the entire living area kind of umbrella. And my nephews, who are in their 30s, I'm an old guy in my 50s, I said, nephews, put this umbrella together for me. And so they went to work, they did all this stuff, put this thing, I came back and I saw it was over this thing. And essentially my older nephew came and said, it is finished. And I'm like, fantastic. Now we have this umbrella that is going to do all the things that my previous umbrellas didn't do. And then he reached out and he gave me a handful of washers, maybe about 20 washers, and said, I didn't put those washers on. I didn't think that you needed them. I tightened the screws and the nuts pretty tight. And I'm like, but the intention of the one who authored and created and designed this umbrella was to put these washers on. But he told me it was finished. And sure enough, when the winds came, like they did, this thing was not stable and it blew back and forth. It wound up not lasting, and we had to go back to getting lesser umbrellas, waiting for them to wear out, and then get other umbrellas, etc. So there are two things I want you to see in that. One, Jesus understood that if you're going to have a total fulfillment that's going to have a lasting power, you can't skip steps. And so Jesus did not skip steps. He, in fact, made sure that every detail was accounted for and taken care of. And so he didn't come and hand, okay, here's these things I didn't think were important. Even the thing he didn't want to do, as was pointed out, he went to Gethsemane and said, look, if you can just find a different kind of way, I would appreciate that. However, not my will, your will be done. I'm going to put every washer on every nut, even if it takes me longer, no matter what that costs, this is the way it has to be done. And he did that because when he says it's finished, it's not just that I completed every task, but it's finished as in it never has to be done again. And the difference between what Jesus did and what my nephews did is that after my nephews built this thing that looked like it was right, I had to come and do it again. I had to go and get my own umbrella and bring it out and try to cover up those things that the wind and the sun on that veranda, because it didn't have abiding, staying power. And Jesus understood, for it to be done once and for all, everything has to be accomplished if I really want to truly say it is finished.